You didn't say anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. But somehow, you could feel it. That slow, quiet pullback. The replies getting shorter. The energy in the room shifting. And then, without any explanation, the silence. And in that silence, you heard it. That voice. The one that whispers, "You're too much. You always have been." And the worst part isn't the silence itself. The worst part is that you're not even surprised. Because somewhere deep inside, you've heard that message before. You've felt it in the way people change the subject when you go too deep. You've felt it in the way someone's eyes glaze over right when you start to say something real. You've been carrying that feeling for so long that it doesn't even feel like a wound anymore. It just feels like the truth. But what if it isn't the truth? What if everything you've been told, every subtle signal that made you feel like your feelings were a problem, was never actually about you? What if the story you've been living inside was written by people who didn't know how to hold you? Stay with me, because what you're about to understand might change the way you see yourself completely. Think about the last time you had something real to say. A feeling that had been building for days. A fear you couldn't shake. An excitement so big it was almost uncomfortable to hold alone. And you opened your mouth. You shared it. Honestly, openly. The way you wish people would share with you. And the response you got was a nod, a subject change, a reply so short it felt like a door closing in your face. In that moment, you didn't just feel unheard, you felt wrong. Like the depth inside you, the part that feels things so completely, that thinks so much, that cares so intensely, was somehow broken, like you were too complicated to be loved easily. And so, without even realizing it, you started to make yourself easier. You laughed off the heavy stuff. You said you were fine before anyone even asked. You learned to take up less space. And for a while, it seemed to work. People stayed. Conversations felt lighter. You stopped making others uncomfortable. But something else happened too. Something quieter and far more painful. You started to feel lonely in a way you couldn't explain. Not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being around people who only knew your edited version. The version of you that had been trimmed and adjusted to fit spaces that were never built for you. Here's what's really going on beneath all of it. There's something that researchers call emotional intensity, and it simply means that some people experience life at a higher volume than everyone else. You feel joy more completely. You feel disappointment more sharply. You think longer, care deeper, and need more meaning, more honesty, more real connection. It's not a defect. It's not immaturity. It's just the way you're wired. But the world doesn't always know what to do with people like you. When you were younger, you probably got messages, not always in words, that your feelings were too big. Maybe you cried and someone told you to calm down. Maybe you loved something with your whole heart and got told you were overreacting. Maybe you asked deep questions and the room went quiet, and your mind, which was only trying to protect you, started to build an equation. More of me means people pull away. Less of me means people stay. And so you chose less. Again and again, you chose less. But here's the painful part that nobody warned you about. When you compress yourself to make others comfortable, you don't just hide from them, you hide from yourself. You start to lose track of who you actually are underneath all the adjusting, and the version of you that shows up in relationships, in conversations, in quiet moments alone, that version starts to feel hollow, because it is. You've been performing a smaller life to fit into rooms that were never the right size for you. Take a moment right now and ask yourself this honestly. How many times today did you hold something back? A feeling, a thought, a reaction that felt too real to say out loud? How many times did you laugh something off that actually hurt? How many times did you say you were fine when you weren't even close to fine? You don't have to answer out loud, but sit with it. Because those moments add up, and over time, they don't just silence your words, they silence your sense of self. And here's the thing you need to understand about why you do that. It didn't come from weakness, it came from love. It came from years of watching how people respond when you're too honest, too emotional, too real. You learned that your feelings made others uncomfortable, and somewhere along the way, you decided their comfort was worth more than your truth. That is not a small thing. That is you abandoning yourself. Gently, slowly, with the best intentions, but abandoning yourself nonetheless. You were not born too much. You were born feeling, fully, deeply, completely, in a world that taught you to feel less. And the gap between who you actually are and who you've learned to perform is where all the exhaustion lives. That's why you're tired in ways that sleep doesn't fix. That's why you feel disconnected, even when you're surrounded by people. That's why some part of you always feels like you're slightly out of place, even in your own life. Now here's something that might be uncomfortable to hear, but it needs to be said. Not everyone who found your depth overwhelming was cruel. Some of them were just limited. There are people in this world who live very carefully on the surface. They keep their feelings measured. They don't go too deep. They've made peace with the shallows. And when they encounter someone like you, someone who feels without a filter, who asks real questions, who refuses to keep things light when something heavy is sitting in the room, it threatens them. Not because you did something wrong, but because your openness shows them everything they've buried inside themselves. Your realness holds up a mirror, and some people cannot stand to look at what's in that reflection. So they pull away. They call you dramatic. They call you sensitive. They call you too much. Because it is far easier to label you as the problem than to sit with what your presence is asking them to feel. You weren't the problem. You were just too honest for people who had made a quiet agreement with dishonesty. You were too awake for people who had gotten comfortable being numb. And you took that personally. Of course you did. Because when the people closest to you reflect that message back, it's almost impossible not to believe it. But their inability to hold you was never a measurement of your worth. It was a measurement of their capacity. And you cannot keep making yourself smaller to fit inside someone else's limitations. You cannot keep dimming your light so that people who are afraid of brightness can feel comfortable around you. Here's the realization that I want you to carry with you. The people who left when things got real, they weren't leaving because you were too much. They were leaving because you were too real. And those are not the same thing. Too much implies that you need to be reduced, that there is an excess of you that needs to be cut away. But too real means something entirely different. It means you exist at a frequency that not everyone is capable of tuning into. And that is not your flaw to fix. That is simply the truth of who you are. There are people in this world who will not flinch when you go deep. People who will lean in when the conversation gets heavy instead of changing the subject. People who will look at the parts of you that you've been hiding in shame and say, "That's the part I was waiting to see." Those people are real. They exist. But they can only find you if you stop pretending to be someone you're not. Every time you shrink yourself, you make it harder for the right people to recognize you. So the next time you feel that familiar pull, the urge to soften, to edit, to disappear into something easier, try something different. Stay. Let yourself be seen. Not for everyone, because you don't owe every person your full depth. But stop betraying yourself to be palatable to people who were never meant to truly know you. The right people won't need you to be less. They will make you feel, for the first time in a long time, like you are exactly enough. You were never too much. You were just in the wrong rooms. You were giving your whole ocean to people who came with a glass. And when they couldn't hold you, you believed it was the ocean's fault. It wasn't. It was never the ocean's fault. The ocean doesn't apologize for its depth. And neither should you. Stop making your feelings small so other people can feel comfortable. Stop swallowing your truth to keep the peace in relationships that were never built to hold you. Stop editing the most alive parts of yourself because someone once made you feel like living fully was inconvenient. You deserve to be known, not the managed version, not the comfortable version, but the real, full, unfiltered version of who you actually are. Because somewhere out there, your depth is someone else's home. Your intensity is someone else's relief. Your realness is exactly what someone else has been starving for. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are someone who feels fully, deeply, completely. And in a world full of people hiding from their own feelings, that is not your weakness. That is your gift. Honor it.